Avoidants are hardwired in a way that makes it nearly impossible for them to get over you, no matter what they say. And there are really 5 reasons, each backed with psychology or biochemistry that proves it. Let's start with reason number 1, the broken bone theory. Now, anyone who's interested in avoidance should without a doubt read this book, Attached, written by Amir Levine and Rachel S.F. Heller. Now, starting around page 209, the authors start talking about this concept, which I'm calling the broken bone theory.
Studies have found that the same areas in the brain that light up when we break a leg are activated when we split up with our mate. As part of a reaction to a breakup, our brain experiences the departure of an attachment figure in a similar way to that in which it registers physical pain.
But it's not just a feeling of pain that takes over. Other thought processes are also hijacked in the process. Once your attachment system becomes activated, another interesting phenomenon is triggered. You will get overwhelmed by the positive memories of the few good times you had together and forget the multitude of bad experiences.
Now, for avid watchers of this channel, this shouldn't be anything new. You've heard me talk about this concept probably hundreds of times. It's essentially the peak end rule. With enough space, an avoidant gets this kind of nostalgia where they remember the peak moments and then forget the bad ones. And I've always found this whole thing rather fascinating. Attached seems to be insinuating that when you go through a breakup, you get this broken bone feeling. But your attachment style can dictate how long it takes for you to get this broken bone feeling. So, for example, when an anxious attachment goes through a breakup, they will feel the broken bone right away. Yet, when an avoidant goes through a breakup, there's this almost delayed reaction. Why? Well, this delayed reaction in avoidance happens because their attachment system works differently. While anxious individuals feel the broken bone immediately, avoidants will suppress their emotions to protect themselves from vulnerability. Their brain essentially numbs the pain, allowing them to convince themselves they're unaffected. But the pain isn't gone, it's just postponed. Over time, as the initial relief of independence fades, their subconscious begins to process the loss. This is when the broken bone starts to hurt. At this point, their brain romanticizes the past, highlighting peak moments and glossing over the bad ones. This delayed nostalgia often leads avoidants to circle back long after their ex has likely moved on. But even though I took this concept from this book, there are going to be people in the comments of this video that will say, well, that's not going to happen with every avoidant, right? Or they'll challenge the fact that it doesn't exist, or I just made it up. Now, one thing that the book doesn't explicitly state is that there's actually kind of a prerequisite that's required before the broken bone feeling will occur. It requires the partner to actually leave them alone long enough for it to occur. And one of the most common pairings you're going to see is an anxious person who gets with an avoidant person, which boils down to one simple fact. The anxious person lacks the discipline needed to give the avoidant space long enough for the broken bone thing to start happening. So instead of stepping back, the anxious person will often chase, they'll seek reassurance, they'll try to force resolution, unknowingly short-circuiting the avoidant's natural process of emotional reconnection. By staying in the avoidant orbit, they prevent the avoidant from experiencing the full impact of the loss, the very thing that might have triggered the nostalgic reflection and regret. This is why something like the no contact rule can become such a powerful tool in dynamics like this. It essentially creates the space that the avoidant needs to process what they're feeling or even start feeling a little bit of regret, and that can lead them to potentially missing their partner. Without space, the avoidant will essentially remain in their comfort zone, which is this walled off area where they don't let anyone in and they're untouched by the actual broken bone feeling. Let's move on to reason number 2, Their biochemistry keeps them hooked on the dopamine you provided. I don't do this often, but I was so impressed with a comment I got on one of my recent videos that I'm going to decide to feature it. This is a comment from Brownell Landrum.
I've been doing tons of research on the whole attachment style thing and found some really interesting data about the biochemistry of romantic addiction. As you know, there are several chemicals involved in romantic attraction: oxytocin, GABA, stress reduction, vasopressin, serotonin, and dopamine. And then there's cortisol, fight or flight. The thing with dismissive avoidants is that whenever they feel oxytocin, their cortisol kicks in and they immediately push away the relationship until the cortisol goes away. For the person on the other end, they're like drug pushers, offering enough oxytocin to get hooked and then taking it away over and over again. That's how they create anxious attachers, even from normally secure people. Instead, dismissive avoidance' drug of choice is dopamine, those ongoing hits that come from attention, and why they love the chase, but get bored in a relationship when that goes away. So they seek other hits, often in the choice of cheating or affairs.
Now, Brownell is insinuating something rather fascinating here. She believes that dismissive avoidants aren't just emotionally detached, they're biologically wired to resist deep bonding while chasing fleeting rewards. Now, if this is true, it creates a pretty powerful paradox. When they're with you, the oxytocin triggers cortisol, which causes them to pull away. But once they've left, they lose the steady supply of dopamine that you provided, those highs from the attention, validation, and excitement that they experienced in the relationship. This is where Brownell's theory starts to shine, in my opinion. While an avoidant might seek new sources of dopamine, whether through distractions or hobbies or even new partners, the specific dopamine pattern they shared with you, rooted in your dynamic and unique connection, becomes hard to replicate. It leaves a kind of imprint, a lingering craving for what they had with you, even if they can't fully articulate it. It's not that they just can't get over you emotionally, it's that their brain chemistry won't allow them to get over you emotionally. But I'd like to take things a step further. If this is true, what happens if they do move on to someone else and get hooked on that person's dopamine? Does that mean they all of a sudden forget about you entirely? Well, everything I'm about to say next is purely speculation, but I have a theory. I don't think they forget about you entirely. I mean, sure, they're not going to be as obsessed or bone broken up about you if they have this new person providing dopamine, but they'll remember the best parts of your relationship and file that away into a type of Phantom X bank. And that's the perfect segue into our next reason. Reason number 3, the Frankenstein X. Okay, if you're new to the world of avoidance, then you probably should have heard about the Phantom X phenomenon. Essentially, the TLDR is they idealize past relationships by selectively remembering the best parts while ignoring or minimizing the negatives. It creates a mental image of a Phantom X, a perfect, unattainable version of their past partner that doesn't fully align with reality. Now, everyone always talks about the Phantom X with the paradigm that there is only one Phantom X, the one that got away. But I think this is completely wrong. I've long held the theory that avoidants don't daydream about just one Phantom X. They have a Phantom Frankenstein X, this make-believe person made up of the best parts of all of their exes. I mean, just consider for a moment the implications of that. It means that no matter how incredible you were in their life, you'll never be remembered as you. Instead, you'll be dissected and fragmented into the best of collection they carry forward. Your kindness might be remembered, but it'll be paired with someone else's ambition. Your sense of humor might be cherished, but spliced together with another ex's independence. And here's the kicker. The Frankenstein X is entirely unattainable. No real person can live up to this patchwork ideal. So while they might move on to someone new, they'll unconsciously compare them to this impossible standard, one that you helped create. And this ensures that in a strange and twisted way, you're never entirely forgotten because part of you becomes a permanent piece of their internal narrative. All right, now it's time for the worst part of the Frankenstein X. As long as they hold on to the Frankenstein X ideal in their head, they'll always be tethered to you, but only to the idealized version of you, not the real you. This keeps them stuck in a cycle of comparing everyone, including you, to an impossible standard. It means they're never fully going to move on, but it also means they'll never truly come back, at least not the way you want them to come back. Let's move on to reason number 4. If you see them without their cloak. Now, one of my favorite movies ever is 500 Days of Summer. The premise is simple. You have a hopeless romantic Tom who falls for a free-spirited woman, Summer, who doesn't believe in love. The movie chronicles their relationship, their breakup, and Tom's journey of self-discovery as he learns that love isn't always what you expect. Now, there's lots to remember about this movie, but there's one moment in particular that I'm thinking of. There's this scene where Tom, our protagonist, is lying in bed with Summer, and she says to him, "I've never told anyone that before." And then this narrator comes on and does like this internal dialogue with what Tom is thinking.
As he listened, Tom began to realize that these stories weren't routinely told. These were stories one had to earn. He could feel the wall coming down. He wondered if anyone else had made it this far.
Now, you may be wondering why I brought up this random scene in this random movie when we're supposed to be talking about avoidance. I promise it connects, but bear with me here. In this video, I talk about a new concept with avoidance called the magician's cloak. Basically, I make this argument that avoidants wear this facade that they think the outside world needs to view them as. This facade really isn't them, it's what they think other people want. Okay, now here is where the 500 Days of Summer analogy connects. Let's say you're with an avoidant and you have a Tom moment. For the first time, they lower their walls and throw off their magician's cloak. In that brief moment, they let you see the real them. The part they don't show to anyone else. It's fleeting, private, and vulnerable. But for them, it feels unexpectedly good to shed this facade, even if only for a second. And this memory leaves an imprint. It's something far deeper than surface-level attraction. This connection becomes more powerful and potent because in their world, they rarely let someone into that level where they see beneath the cloak. Even after the relationship ends, they still think of that moment. It lingers in their mind and makes it impossible to completely forget you. You weren't just another person in their life. You were someone who saw them without their cloak. And that's not something they easily let go of. So the question now becomes, how do you know that you've seen them without their cloak? Well, as much as I hate to not point at something scientific, I'm afraid I'm going to have to do that here. Here's the key. It's not about what they say, it's about how it feels. An avoidant throwing off their cloak is often marked by moments of deep vulnerability where they share something they've likely never shared before. You might hear them recount a story from their past that clearly holds emotional weight. They'll confess a fear or insecurity they usually hide, and it's often something they preface with, "I've never told anyone this," just like our movie. Or they'll seem almost uncomfortable sharing it, as if they're testing the waters of truly being seen. These moments have a certain energy. You feel the weight of their walls coming down. It might happen in a quiet, private setting where they feel safe, and the connection feels almost electric, like something significant passed between you. You'll know you've seen them without their cloak because it won't feel like an ordinary conversation. It'll feel like they've let you into a part of themselves they don't let others touch. And this leads us to our 5th and final reason. Reason 5, the emotional time capsule effect. Have you ever heard of a concept called state-dependent memory? It's essentially this phenomenon where memories tied to a specific emotional state is more easily recalled when revisiting that state. Here's the thing about avoidance. They compartmentalize their emotions to survive. But those emotions don't disappear. They get locked away like an emotional time capsule, waiting to be triggered by something that pulls them back into that same state. Now, here's the most ironic part. You're going to hate me. This, once again, for the millionth time, is my avoidant death wheel. This is the cycle every avoidant is trapped in. 8 stages divided into 2 parts. You have the relationship stages, the I want someone to love me, I found someone, my problems are over, hey, I'm noticing some worrying things and I think I need to leave the relationship. And then you have the breakup stages. I leave the relationship, I'm so happy I left, wait, I'm starting to feel kind of lonely, wait, why can't I ever find the right person? The interesting thing about the death wheel is that by design, it is going to put avoidance back into the same state over and over and over again, which actually makes state-dependent memory quite important. Here, watch as this plays out. Let's say we take my favorite avoidant, Bob, here, and run him through a death wheel. He starts off wanting someone to love him. He meets you and thinks his problems are over. He notices some worrying things, often manufactured by him, decides he needs to break up with you, actually breaks up with you, has this separation elation, begins to feel kind of lonely, and then he wonders why he can't ever find the right person, and then he's back at the start of the death wheel. But you left an impact. So when he starts the death wheel over again, he's back at stage 1, wanting someone to love him. That emotional state pulls up the time capsule tied to you. Memories of your connection resurface, not because he's consciously dwelling on you, but because the cycle keeps forcing him back into the same emotional spaces where you left your imprint. Oh, look! Now Bob has met someone new and broken up with them. Oh, now he's comparing their breakup to your breakup. Yours was much more cordial. Oh, now he's lonely. When was the last time he was this lonely? Oh, right, you. So who does he think about? You. You're not just a fleeting thought. You're woven into the very cycle he can't escape because it's in his nature. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the emotional time capsule effect. Now, the question you have to answer is this. Do you want to be a part of the cycle that he can't escape? Or do you want to break free from it yourself? Because while you may be trapped in his patterns, that doesn't always mean you have to be.